Listen carefully. United States Treasury Department, European Union sanctions coordinators, Western financial institutions that think you control global commerce. I just made a deal with Russia. A sophisticated, calculated, and strategic partnership. You tried to prevent design sanctions to stop it. You built financial walls to block it. And what happened next shattered your entire sanctions architecture. Let me explain what I did. What has every Western sanctions coordinator in emergency damage control right now? I signed agreement with Russia a few months ago. Not public agreement, announced deal and not visible arrangement. The agreement I negotiated in secret, the arrangement I designed specifically to bypass your sanctions, secret agreement that nobody reported, that no media covered, that no intelligence agency detected. That was my intention, my strategy, my brilliance. I am Ibrahim Traoré, president of Burkina Faso, leader who came to power. Through military coup, popular support, revolutionary momentum, rejection of French influence, and through demand for sovereignty, I became president and immediately faced problem, immediate challenge, urgent crisis. My country needed resources, needed military equipment, needed economic support, development assistance, needed everything that your Western sanctions made difficult to obtain. Your sanctions against Russia were comprehensive, were supposedly airtight, sanctions that prevented Russian banks from accessing SWIFT system, that froze Russian assets in Western financial institutions, that prohibited trade in certain goods, that restricted technology transfers, that limited financial transactions, that created walls, that built barriers, that established controls. Comprehensive sanctions designed to isolate Russia economically, to pressure Russia politically, to punish Russia strategically. Sanctions that you believed were working, that you thought were effective, that you assumed were comprehensive. I studied your sanctions, examined them carefully, analyzed them systematically, reviewed them thoroughly, scrutinized every regulation, every restriction, every prohibition, investigated them not to comply, respect them, not to honor them, dissected them to find weaknesses, to identify gaps, to discover loopholes, to locate vulnerabilities, to understand bypass methods, studied them like engineer studies building to find structural weaknesses, like hacker examines system to find security flaws, like lawyer reviews law to find legal loopholes. I found the weaknesses, discovered them systematically, located them comprehensively, identified them completely, found that your sanctions focused on financial transactions through Western banking systems, discovered that your restrictions targeted specific goods and technologies, located that your controls relied on enforcement through Western-dominated institutions, identified that your measures assumed compliance from non-Western nations, found that your sanctions contained gaps, held loopholes, possessed vulnerabilities, offered bypass opportunities, uncovered everything I needed to structure my deal. The deal I structured was sophisticated, was carefully designed, was strategically brilliant, was legally defensible, was practically implementable, was completely effective. Deal that bypassed every major sanction, that sidestepped every financial control, that circumvented every restriction, that evaded every limitation. Deal that worked, that functioned, that succeeded. Deal that I'm going to explain, that I'm going to expose, that I'm going to reveal. So you understand, so you see, so you know how completely your sanction system failed. I needed military equipment, required it urgently, demanded it desperately. My country faces terrorism, confronts jihadist insurgency, battles security threats, encounters existential dangers, required weapons to fight, demanded ammunition for operations, needed vehicles for mobility, sought technology for effectiveness, wanted training for capability, required everything for national defense, needed it and couldn't obtain it from you, couldn't get it from Western sources because you demanded conditions, insisted on political alignment, required policy changes, demanded concessions, insisted on submission, demanded everything I refused to give. Russia offered what I needed, provided military equipment without conditions, without demands, without requirements, without concessions, without submission, supplied weapons, delivered ammunition, furnished vehicles, transferred technology, offered training, provided everything my country needed, offered it at reasonable prices, at favorable terms, at accessible conditions, presented it with respect for my sovereignty, with recognition of my independence, with acknowledgement of my self-determination, delivered everything I needed, everything Burkina Faso required, everything that you refused to provide. I negotiated directly with Russian officials, discussed secretly, planned carefully, strategized methodically, communicated through secure channels, through encrypted communications, through trusted intermediaries, through protected meetings, negotiated in Moscow, discussed in third countries, met wherever necessary, negotiated for few months, for detailed discussions, for careful planning, for strategic structuring, for comprehensive agreements. I structured the financial arrangements to bypass SWIFT completely, circumvented it deliberately, sidestepped it systematically, avoided it permanently. I connected my central bank to Russia's financial messaging system, to SPFS, system that Russia developed to replace SWIFT, system that connects Russian banks, that enables domestic transactions, that facilitates international payments with partner nations, that processes trade financing, that handles all functions that SWIFT provided. System that operates independently, that functions autonomously, that works effectively. I established direct financial connection between Ouagadougou and Moscow, link that enables instant transactions, that processes payments immediately, that settles accounts finally. Connection that bypasses your control, that sidesteps your oversight, that escapes your sanctions, link that works, that functions, that succeeds. But I didn't stop with SPFS, didn't rely on single system, didn't create single point of failure. I built redundancy, constructed backup systems, developed alternative mechanisms, created multiple pathways for financial transactions, established them because I understood that single system creates vulnerability, generates dependency, produces risk, developed multiple systems to ensure resilience, to guarantee continuity, to maintain functionality even if one system fails. I established cryptocurrency arrangements, set them up for government transactions, for trade payments, for equipment purchases, for resource sales, for all financial activities requiring international transfers, created Bitcoin wallets, opened Ethereum accounts, secured stablecoin holdings, arranged everything necessary for blockchain transactions, developed cryptocurrency infrastructure that operates independently of any government control, of any institutional oversight, of any regulatory framework, cryptocurrency that enables peer-to-peer transactions, that facilitates cross-border payments, that processes large transfers, that maintains security, that ensures finality. I connected my cryptocurrency wallets directly to Russian counterparts, linked them securely, joined them functionally, bonded them permanently. Connection that enables instant transfers, that processes payments immediately, that settles transactions finally. Link that exists outside your control, outside your oversight, outside your regulatory reach. Connection that you cannot monitor completely, cannot regulate effectively, cannot stop. I connected to China's cross-border interbank payment system, to CIPS, linked my financial institutions to Chinese payment infrastructure, connection that enables transactions denominated in yuan. That facilitates trade through Chinese financial systems, that bypasses Western banking completely, that sidesteps dollar transactions entirely, that operates independently of your control. Link that processes payments between Burkina Faso and Russia through Chinese intermediation, through yuan denomination, through CIPS infrastructure, through mechanisms you cannot sanction without sanctioning China. Cannot block without blocking Chinese financial system. Cannot stop without stopping legitimate Chinese international commerce. I structured commodity barter arrangements, organized them to sidestep financial transactions entirely, to exchange goods for goods, to trade resources for equipment, to swap commodities for services. Arranged exchanges as old as human commerce, as fundamental as trade itself, as simple as direct exchange, arrangements that require no banking systems, no financial infrastructure, no payment processing, no currency exchange. Arrangements that simply exchange value for value, goods for goods, resources for equipment. My country has gold, possesses significant gold reserves, operates active gold mining, produces substantial gold output. We produce approximately 60 tons annually. 60 tons worth approximately $3.6 billion at current prices. Substantial production, significant output, considerable value, production that I control, that I direct, that I utilize, that I leverage. I redirected 20% of my gold production to Russia. 20% equals 12 tons annually. 12 tons worth approximately $720 million. Substantial value, significant amount, considerable payment. Payment that settles accounts, that purchases equipment, that funds arrangements, that enables deals. Payment in gold that requires no banking system, that needs no financial infrastructure, that operates independently of your control. I organized secure gold shipments, arranged them systematically, coordinated them professionally, managed them effectively. My gold is refined in Burkina Faso, processed to international standards, purified to acceptable quality, refined to tradable specifications, refined and certified, documented and authenticated, verified and validated, refined gold that meets all international standards, that satisfies all quality requirements, that fulfills all purity specifications. I transport my refined gold to Russia, ship it securely, move it directly, convey it professionally, transport it by air primarily, by secure cargo flights, by protected shipments, by guarded transports, move it with security, with protection, with safeguards, with everything necessary to ensure safe delivery, transport it and Russia receives it, deliver it and Russia accepts it, transfer it and Russia confirms it. Russia receives my gold into their central bank reserves, accepts it officially, takes it properly, acquires it legitimately, receives gold that increases Russian reserves. That strengthens Russian financial position, that enhances Russian economic security, accepts gold that has value, that represents payment, that settles accounts, that completes transactions, receives my gold and provides my equipment, delivers my weapons, sends my ammunition, ships my vehicles, transfers my technology, provides my training, fulfills our agreements. The exchange rate I negotiated is favorable, is reasonable, is mutually acceptable, is economically sound. Rate that values gold at market prices, that prices equipment competitively, that structures deals fairly, that creates win-win arrangements. Rate that benefits my country by providing needed equipment, that benefits Russia by acquiring valuable gold, that benefits both parties through mutually advantageous trade. The equipment that arrived is comprehensive, is extensive, is significant, is substantial, is everything my country needs. I received small arms, obtained assault rifles, acquired machine guns, got mortars, secured artillery, received ammunition for all weapons, obtained armored vehicles, acquired transport trucks, got communication equipment, secured surveillance technology, received training programs, obtained technical support, acquired maintenance assistance, got everything necessary for effective military capability. The value of equipment I received exceeded $200 million, surpassed it significantly, went beyond it substantially. $200 million in military equipment that bypassed your sanctions, that evaded your controls, that circumvented your restrictions, that sidestepped your monitoring. $200 million that represented complete failure of your sanctions architecture, total collapse of your control systems, absolute breakdown of your enforcement mechanisms, complete failure of your entire approach. I organized multiple delivery routes, established them to ensure continuous supply, to maintain steady flow, to guarantee reliable delivery, to prevent interruption. Primary route I established was direct air transport, transport using Russian cargo aircraft, aircraft that fly from Russia to Burkina Faso, that land in Ouagadougou, that unload equipment, that deliver weapons, that bring ammunition, that transport vehicles, that carry technology, direct flights that you monitor, that you track, that you observe, that you document, but cannot stop, cannot prevent, cannot block. Why can't you stop them? Because they violate no international law, because they breach no aviation regulations, because they infringe no air traffic rules. Because Russian aircraft have right to fly international routes, have right to land in nations that permit them, have right to deliver cargo to willing recipients, have right that you cannot revoke, cannot cancel, cannot eliminate. Right that exists regardless of your sanctions, regardless of your prohibitions, regardless of your restrictions. You pressured me to deny landing rights, urged me diplomatically, coerced me economically, threatened me politically, insisted I refuse Russian aircraft, to block Russian deliveries. To stop Russian equipment, I refused, rejected your pressure, declined your demands, dismissed your requirements, refused because I'm sovereign leader, because Burkina Faso is independent nation, because sovereignty means making own decisions, because independence means resisting foreign pressure, because self-determination means choosing own partners. Secondary route I established was maritime transport, transport using Russian cargo ships, ships that sail from Russian ports, that travel through international waters, that dock in West African ports, that unload equipment, that deliver weapons, that bring ammunition, that transport vehicles, that carry technology, maritime transport that you monitor, that you track, that you observe, that you document, but cannot stop, cannot prevent, cannot block. Ships dock in various West African ports, not always in Burkina Faso because my country is landlocked, dock in neighboring nations, in ports that accept Russian vessels, in facilities that process Russian cargo, in locations that permit Russian deliveries, dock legally, dock properly, dock legitimately, dock and unload equipment that I then transport overland to Burkina Faso, move by truck, convey by rail, transport by whatever means available, ship across borders, move through customs, transport with proper documentation, convey legally. Tertiary route I established was ground transport through non-compliant nations, through nations that rejected your sanctions, that refused your pressure, that maintained their sovereignty, nations that permit Russian cargo to transit their territory, that allow Russian equipment to cross their borders, that enable Russian deliveries to reach destinations, nations that you cannot sanction without creating diplomatic crises, that you cannot pressure without risking relationships, that you cannot stop without using force. My equipment travels from Russia through Kazakhstan, through Central Asia, through Middle East, through North Africa, through multiple nations, through various routes, through different pathways, moves legally, travels properly, journeys legitimately, travels with documentation, with permits, with authorizations, with everything required by international law, moves in ways that you can monitor but cannot stop, can track but cannot prevent, can observe but cannot block. Beyond military equipment, I secured technology transfer, obtained it explicitly, acquired it comprehensively, gained it systematically, technology transfer that your sanctions tried to prevent, that your restrictions tried to block, that your controls tried to stop, technology transfer that I obtained anyway, that I received completely, that I implemented successfully. Russia transferred mining technology to me, provided it to improve my gold production, to increase extraction efficiency, to enhance processing capability, to optimize operational effectiveness, delivered technology for exploration, for drilling, for extraction, for processing, for refining, for all aspects of mining operations, supplied technology that boosts my production, that improves my efficiency, that enhances my capability. The technology I received includes equipment, contains machinery, encompasses tools, comprises systems, includes everything necessary for modern mining operations, features drilling equipment that reaches deeper deposits, processing machinery that handles ore more efficiently, refining systems that achieve higher purity, transportation equipment that moves materials more effectively, everything that improves my mining operations, everything that increases my production, everything that enhances my profitability. The technology I received includes knowledge, contains expertise, encompasses training, comprises technical support, includes everything necessary for effective technology utilization. Russian engineers came to my country, arrived to train my personnel, to transfer knowledge, to build capability, to create expertise, came and taught my people, instructed and guided my workers, trained and developed my technicians, created local capability, built local expertise, established local knowledge. Russia transferred agricultural technology to me, provided it to improve my food production, to increase crop yields, to enhance farming efficiency, to optimize agricultural operations, delivered technology for irrigation, for fertilization, for pest control, for harvesting, for storage, for all aspects of agricultural operations, supplied technology that boosts my production. That improves my efficiency, that enhances my food security. Russia transferred energy technology to me, provided it to improve my power generation, to increase electricity production, to enhance energy security, to optimize power systems, delivered technology for solar power, for wind power, for hydroelectric power, for all renewable energy sources, supplied technology that boosts my generation, that improves my distribution, that enhances my access. All this technology transfer violated your sanctions, breached them explicitly, contravened them comprehensively, defied them systematically. Your sanctions prohibited technology transfer to Russia, banned it to limit Russian technological advancement, to restrict Russian industrial capability, to constrain Russian economic development, but said nothing about technology transfer from Russia, said nothing about Russian technology coming to other nations, said nothing about Russian expertise being shared, said nothing because you never imagined Russia would be technology source, would be expertise provider, would be capability builder. Your assumption was wrong. Your belief was incorrect. Your expectation was mistaken. Russia has technology, possesses expertise, commands capability, holds knowledge, has everything necessary to be technology provider, to be expertise source, to be capability builder, possesses it and shares it with me, provides it to me, delivers it to me, because I treat Russia with respect, because I engage Russia as equal, because I value Russian partnership. I protected this arrangement diplomatically, shielded it systematically, safeguarded it comprehensively, defended it effectively, protected it through multiple mechanisms, through various strategies, through different approaches, through diverse methods, shielded it in ways that made your response difficult, made your pressure ineffective, made your sanctions irrelevant. I secured African Union support, obtained backing from fellow African nations, gained endorsement from continental organization, acquired support from regional partners, support that legitimizes my actions, that validates my decisions, that endorses my choices, support that comes from shared experience, from common history, from collective resentment of Western interference, from unified commitment to African sovereignty. I framed my deal with Russia as sovereignty exercise, as independence demonstration, as self-determination implementation, as rejection of Western dictation, presented it as African nation making own decisions, choosing own partners, determining own policies, conducting own affairs, framed it in ways that resonate with African experience, that connect with African history, that appeal to African values, that generate African support. African nations support me, back me publicly, endorse me diplomatically, champion me politically, support me because they understand, because they sympathize, because they agree, because they face similar pressures, because they resent similar interference, because they value similar sovereignty. Support that protects me from isolation, that prevents my marginalization, that maintains my legitimacy, that validates my actions. I secured Russian diplomatic support, obtained backing from powerful partner, gained endorsement from Permanent Security Council member, acquired support from major global power. Support that complicates your response, that limits your options, that constrains your actions. Support that makes sanctions enforcement difficult, makes pressure application risky, makes intervention costly. Russia defends me internationally, shields me in United Nations, protects me in international forums, backs me in diplomatic channels, defends me against your criticism, against your pressure, against your sanctions threats, supports me because I am partner, because I am ally, because I am friend, because I represent successful sanctions evasion, because I demonstrate your system's failure, because I prove your control's limits. I maintain domestic popular support, sustain backing from Burkinabe people, preserve endorsement from national population, keep support from citizens who value sovereignty, who appreciate independence, who demand self-determination, support that gives me political strength, that provides me legitimacy, that ensures my stability. Support that makes your pressure ineffective because it cannot undermine my domestic position. My people support my Russia deal, back it enthusiastically, endorse it vocally, champion it consistently, support it because they see results, because they receive security, because they obtain equipment, because they experience sovereignty, because they witness independence, because they feel dignity. Support that protects me politically, that sustains me domestically, that enables me internationally. You responded to my deal, reacted eventually, answered inadequately, countered ineffectively, responded in ways that demonstrated your weakness, that revealed your limits, that exposed your failures, reacted and achieved nothing, accomplished nothing, changed nothing. I watched your response, analyzed your actions, evaluated your effectiveness, concluded your irrelevance. You threatened sanctions against my country, menaced them to pressure me, to force my compliance, to stop my Russia deal, to end my sanctions evasion, threatened economic sanctions, trade restrictions, financial penalties, aid suspensions, everything you typically use, everything you normally threaten, everything you routinely deploy, threatened and expected my compliance, expected my submission, expected my surrender. You were disappointed. I ignored your threats, dismissed them completely, disregarded them publicly, spurned them defiantly, ignored them because I could, because I had alternatives, because I had partners, because I had options, because I didn't need you, didn't depend on you, didn't fear you. Ignored your threats and continued my deal, maintained my arrangements, sustained my partnership, proceeded with my plans. You implemented some sanctions against me, imposed them to demonstrate resolve, to show determination, to prove seriousness, implemented sanctions that restricted some trade, that limited some financial transactions, that reduced some cooperation, imposed sanctions that were symbolic, that were performative, that were meaningless, applied sanctions that changed nothing, that achieved nothing, that accomplished nothing. Why were your sanctions ineffective against me? Because my country doesn't depend on American trade, doesn't rely on American finance, doesn't need American aid, doesn't require American approval. Because I had built alternative relationships, had developed different partnerships, had established other arrangements, had created independence from your system, had achieved autonomy from your control, had secured freedom from your pressure. You pressured European allies to sanction my country, urged them to join your response, to coordinate your actions, to multiply your pressure, to enhance your effectiveness. Pressured France particularly, urged them to use their historical influence, to leverage their traditional relationships, to deploy their colonial connections, to force my compliance. Some European nations complied, some imposed symbolic sanctions, some made diplomatic protests, some expressed official concern. All achieved nothing, all accomplished nothing, all changed nothing. You attempted to pressure African nations to isolate me, tried to create regional pressure, to generate continental opposition, to produce African criticism, to manufacture peer pressure. Attempted and failed. Failed completely. Failed obviously. Failed embarrassingly. Failed because African nations refused. Rejected your pressure. Declined your demands. Dismissed your manipulation. Refused because they understood my position. Because they sympathized with my actions. Because they supported my sovereignty. Because they valued my independence. You attempted financial pressure against me, tried to restrict my country's access to international financial systems, to limit our banking relationships, to constrain our financial transactions, to reduce our economic capabilities, attempted through informal pressure on banks, through regulatory intimidation, through compliance threats, through enforcement warnings, tried and achieved limited success. Limited because I had already built alternative financial infrastructure, had already established independent payment systems, had already created autonomous transaction mechanisms, had already secured freedom from your financial control. Your response was too little, was insufficient, was inadequate, was weak, was ineffective. Too little because you couldn't match what Russia offered me, couldn't provide equivalent military equipment, couldn't offer comparable technology transfer, couldn't deliver similar partnership terms, couldn't compete with Russian willingness to respect my sovereignty, to honor my independence, to value my self-determination. Too little because your response was constrained by your own limitations, by your own contradictions, by your own hypocrisy. Your response was too late, was delayed, was tardy, was belated, was untimely. Too late because I had already structured my deal, had already established my arrangements, had already built my alternative systems, had already created my independence. Too late because the damage was done. The precedent was set, the example was established, the model was created. Too late because other nations were watching, were learning, were planning, were preparing to follow my example. My deal with Russia wasn't just bilateral arrangement, wasn't just one nation's sanctions evasion, wasn't just isolated incident, was precedent, was model, was example, was template, was demonstration that your sanctions can be bypassed, that your controls can be evaded, that your system can be defeated. Demonstration that other nations observed, that other leaders studied, that other governments analyzed, that other countries prepared to replicate. Mali followed my example immediately, adopted my model, replicated my template. Mali's military government negotiated similar deal with Russia, structured it using my methods, using my financial mechanisms, using my payment systems, using my resource exchange framework, using my diplomatic protection strategies, arranged deal that brought Russian military equipment, that acquired Russian technology, that established Russian partnership, deal that bypassed your sanctions, that evaded your controls, that defeated your system. Niger followed my pattern quickly, copied the same model, implemented the same template. Niger's military government structured similar arrangements with Russia, organized them using my proven methods, using my tested mechanisms, using my validated approaches, using my successful strategies, developed arrangements that obtained Russian equipment, that received Russian technology, that built Russian partnership, arrangements that circumvented your sanctions, that sidestepped your controls, that escaped your system. Chad is negotiating now, is discussing, is planning, is preparing. Chad's government is studying my model, is analyzing my methods, is evaluating my mechanisms, is assessing my strategies, is preparing to replicate my success, to follow my example, to implement my template, to achieve my results, negotiating arrangements that will bypass your sanctions, that will evade your controls, that will defeat your system. Guinea is considering, is contemplating, is evaluating, is examining. Guinea's government is watching my success, is observing my achievements, is noting my results, is learning my lessons, is considering similar arrangements, similar deals, similar partnerships, similar strategies, contemplating options that will circumvent your sanctions, that will sidestep your controls, that will escape your system. The pattern I created is spreading, is expanding, is growing, is multiplying across West Africa, across Sahel region, across entire continent. African nations are learning from me, are studying my methods, are planning their own arrangements, are preparing their own deals, learning that your sanctions can be bypassed, that your controls can be evaded, that your system can be defeated. Learning from my example, from my success, from my achievement, from my victory. The pattern I established extends beyond Africa, reaches to other regions, spreads to other continents, expands globally. Nations in Latin America are watching me. Nations in Asia are observing me. Nations in Middle East are studying me. Nations everywhere are learning from me, learning that alternatives exist, that options are available, that independence is possible, that sovereignty can be maintained. Learning from my demonstration, from my proof, from my validation, from my success. My success exposed fundamental flaws in your sanctions system, revealed them comprehensively, unveiled them obviously, demonstrated them undeniably, flaws that were always present, that were always structural, that were always inevitable, flaws that you ignored, that you denied, that you dismissed, flaws that I exploited, that I utilized, that I leveraged, that I weaponized against your system. I exposed your assumption of financial control, your presumption that you control global financial systems, that you dominate international banking, that you monopolize payment infrastructure, that you dictate financial transactions. Assumption that was partially true, that was historically valid, that was traditionally accurate. Assumption that is increasingly false, that is progressively invalid, that is systematically inaccurate. I proved alternatives exist. I demonstrated options are available. I validated independence is possible. I proved SWIFT is not the only international payment system, is not the only financial messaging network, is not the only transaction infrastructure. I showed alternatives exist. SPFS exists. CIPS exists. Cryptocurrency exists. Barter exists. Commodity exchange exists. I used multiple alternatives that operate independently, that function autonomously, that work effectively. Alternatives that you cannot control, cannot dominate, cannot monopolize, cannot dictate. Alternatives that enabled my sanctions evasion, that facilitated my control circumvention, that permitted my system bypass. I exposed your assumption of compliance, your presumption that all nations will respect your sanctions, will honor your restrictions, will follow your rules, will obey your commands. Assumption that was never fully true, that was never completely valid, that was never entirely accurate. Assumption that is increasingly false, That is progressively invalid. That is systematically inaccurate. I proved sovereignty matters. I demonstrated independence exists. I validated self-determination is valued. I rejected your sanctions, refused them explicitly, declined them publicly, spurned them systematically, rejected them because I'm sovereign, because I'm independent, because I determine my own policies, because I choose my own partners, because I refuse your dictation. My rejection creates alternatives, enables evasion, facilitates bypass, permits defeat of your system. I exposed your assumption of enforcement capability, your presumption that you can enforce your sanctions, can compel compliance, can punish violations, can prevent evasion. Assumption that was partially true, that was historically valid, that was traditionally accurate. Assumption that is increasingly false, that is progressively invalid, that is systematically inaccurate. I proved your enforcement is limited. I demonstrated your capability is constrained. I validated your power is finite. You cannot enforce sanctions against me, cannot pressure my government effectively, cannot punish my violations meaningfully, cannot prevent my evasion successfully. Your enforcement resources are limited. Your diplomatic capital is finite, your economic leverage is constrained, your military options are restricted, your enforcement capability is inadequate for comprehensive sanctions system, inadequate for global control, inadequate for universal compliance. I exploited this inadequacy, I utilized this limitation, I leveraged this weakness. I exposed your assumption of necessity, your presumption that nations need you, need your trade, need your finance, need your technology, need your approval, need your permission, need your blessing. Assumption that was partially true. That was historically valid. That was traditionally accurate. Assumption rooted in decades of Western dominance, rooted in centuries of colonial relationships, rooted in generations of economic dependency. Assumption that shaped international relations, that defined global commerce, that structured world politics, that determined power dynamics. Assumption that you built your entire system upon, that you constructed your global order around, that you based your foreign policy on, that you relied upon completely. Assumption that is increasingly false, that is progressively invalid, that is systematically inaccurate, false because the world changed, invalid because alternatives emerged, inaccurate because power shifted, changed in ways you didn't anticipate, emerged in forms you didn't expect, shifted to centers you didn't recognize, changed because other nations developed, emerged because other powers rose, shifted because other systems succeeded, changed, emerged, and shifted while you remained convinced of your indispensability, while you believed in your irreplaceability, while you assumed your centrality to global affairs. I proved alternatives exist. I demonstrated options are available. I validated independence is possible, proved it through my actions, demonstrated it through my choices, validated it through my success, proved that nations don't need Western trade exclusively, demonstrated that countries can access finance elsewhere, validated that peoples can obtain technology from other sources, proved, demonstrated, and validated what you claimed was impossible. What you insisted was unrealistic, what you declared was fantasy, proved your claims wrong, demonstrated your insistence false, validated your declarations inaccurate. Russia provides me military equipment, supplies it without conditions, without demands, without requirements, without the endless strings you attach to everything, without the political interference you consider normal, without the sovereignty violations you deem acceptable, supplies weapons that my country needs, that my military requires, that my defense demands, supplies assault rifles for my soldiers, supplies armored vehicles for my forces, supplies artillery for my operations, supplies ammunition for my campaigns, supplies training for my personnel, supplies maintenance for my equipment, supplies everything necessary for effective defense, for credible deterrence, for national security, supplies it at prices I can afford, at terms I can accept, at conditions I can meet, prices that don't bankrupt my treasury, terms that don't compromise my sovereignty, conditions that don't violate my independence, prices, terms, and conditions that respect my nation, that honor my government, that acknowledge my people, that treat Burkina Faso as equal partner rather than subordinate client, as sovereign nation rather than dependent territory, as independent country rather than colonial possession, supplies it with respect for my sovereignty, with recognition of my independence, with acknowledgement of my self-determination, respect that you never showed, recognition that you never granted, acknowledgement that you never provided, respect demonstrated through non-interference in my internal affairs, recognition demonstrated through acceptance of my policy choices, acknowledgement demonstrated through support for my strategic decisions, demonstrated consistently, demonstrated genuinely, demonstrated without hypocrisy. Russia doesn't demand that I adopt their political system, doesn't require that I implement their economic model, doesn't insist that I follow their social policies, doesn't demand, require, or insist on anything beyond payment and partnership, beyond commercial transaction and strategic cooperation, beyond mutual benefit and reciprocal respect, doesn't lecture me about democracy while supporting dictatorships elsewhere, doesn't preach about human rights while violating them systematically, doesn't moralize about governance while practicing imperialism globally. China provides me economic investment, delivers it without political strings, without policy dictation, without governance interference, without the conditionalities you impose on every loan, without the structural adjustments you demand for every credit, without the policy reforms you require for every investment, delivers infrastructure development that my country needs, that my economy requires, that my people demand, delivers roads that connect my cities, delivers bridges that span my rivers, delivers ports that access global markets, delivers railways that move my goods, delivers power plants that generate electricity, delivers telecommunications that enable connectivity, delivers it through loans I can repay, through terms I can manage, through schedules I can maintain, loans with reasonable interest rates, terms with realistic timelines, schedules with achievable milestones, loans, terms, and schedules designed for success rather than failure, designed for development rather than dependency, designed for growth rather than control, designed to help rather than hinder, to support rather than exploit, to enable rather than constrain. Delivers it with respect for my sovereignty, with recognition of my independence, with acknowledgement of my self-determination, respect for my right to choose my own development path, recognition of my authority to determine my own priorities, acknowledgement of my capacity to manage my own affairs, respect, recognition, and acknowledgement that you never provided, that you never considered, that you never imagined necessary. China doesn't demand that I privatize my state enterprises, doesn't require that I liberalize my financial markets, doesn't insist that I deregulate my economy, doesn't demand, require, or insist on Washington consensus policies that failed across Africa, that destroyed economies throughout Latin America, that devastated societies across Asia, doesn't impose ideology disguised as economics, doesn't mandate policy disguised as assistance, doesn't dictate governance disguised as partnership. Other nations provide me other things, supply them with respect for my sovereignty, with recognition of my independence, with acknowledgement of my self-determination. They provide me alternatives, supply me options, grant me independence, give me freedom from your control. Turkey provides me trade relationships. India provides me technical cooperation. Iran provides me energy partnerships. United Arab Emirates provides me investment opportunities. Saudi Arabia provides me financial support. Qatar provides me development assistance. Multiple nations providing multiple things. Multiple sources providing multiple options. Multiple partners providing multiple alternatives. Each relationship structured on mutual respect, on reciprocal benefit, on sovereign equality. Each partnership acknowledging my independence, recognizing my autonomy, honoring my self-determination. Each cooperation respecting my choices, supporting my priorities, enabling my objectives. Each interaction treating me as equal, as partner. As sovereign nation deserving respect rather than subordinate territory requiring management. They provide me alternatives to your dominance, supply me options beyond your control, grant me independence from your system, give me freedom from your dictation, alternatives that you claimed didn't exist, options that you insisted weren't available, independence that you declared impossible, freedom that you pronounced unrealistic, alternatives, options, independence, and freedom that I now possess, that I now exercise, that I now enjoy, that I now defend. I exposed your assumption of permanence, your presumption that your dominance is permanent, that your control is eternal, that your system is unchangeable, that your power is unshakable. Presumption rooted in hubris, in arrogance, in historical amnesia, hubris that ignores rise and fall of empires, arrogance that dismisses lessons of history, amnesia that forgets impermanence of power. Hubris, arrogance, and amnesia that blind you to reality, that prevent you from adapting, that ensure your decline. Assumption that was never true, that was never valid, that was never accurate, never true because all dominance is temporary, never valid because all control is conditional, never accurate because all systems change. History proves this repeatedly, demonstrates this consistently, validates this universally. Roman Empire fell, British Empire collapsed, Soviet Union dissolved. Every empire in history eventually declined, every dominance eventually eroded, every control eventually weakened. Your dominance will be no different. Your control will follow same pattern. Your system will experience same fate. I proved dominance is temporary. I demonstrated control is conditional. I validated systems change. I showed power shifts, proved it through my resistance, demonstrated it through my independence, validated it through my success, showed it through my example, proved that your dominance can be challenged, demonstrated that your control can be resisted, validated that your system can be bypassed, showed that your power can be countered. Your financial dominance is declining, is eroding, is diminishing, is weakening, declining measurably, eroding systematically, diminishing progressively, weakening continuously. Dollar's share of global reserves falling, euro's role in international trade expanding, yuan's use in bilateral commerce growing, alternative currencies' importance in regional transactions increasing, decline that accelerates annually, erosion that deepens quarterly, diminishment that expands monthly, weakening that intensifies daily. I contribute to this decline. I participate in this erosion. I accelerate this diminishment. I facilitate this weakening, contribute through my currency choices, participate through my financial decisions, accelerate through my payment systems, facilitate through my trade arrangements, contribute by reducing dollar usage, participate by increasing alternative currency transactions, accelerate by adopting new payment mechanisms, facilitate by establishing independent financial infrastructure. Dollar dominance is challenged by my actions, is questioned by my choices, is reduced by my decisions, is threatened by my alternatives, challenged when I trade in yuan, questioned when I settle in rubles, reduced when I transact in gold, threatened when I bypass SWIFT, challenged, questioned, reduced, and threatened systematically, deliberately, strategically, effectively. I use alternative currencies for international trade, for resource exports, for equipment imports, for service payments, for all transactions where alternatives exist, where options are available, where independence is possible. Use yuan for Chinese trade. Use rubles for Russian commerce. Use gold for commodity exchanges. Use cryptocurrency for digital transactions. Use whatever currency serves my interests, protects my sovereignty, maintains my independence. I employ alternative systems for financial transfers, for payment processing, for trade settlement, for transaction clearing, for all financial operations where alternatives exist, where options are available, where independence is possible. Employ SPFS for Russian transactions. Employ SIPs for Chinese payments. Employ blockchain for cryptocurrency transfers. Employ barter for commodity exchanges. Employ whatever system serves my interests, protects my sovereignty, maintains my independence. I implement alternative mechanisms for economic cooperation, for investment flows, for development finance, for commercial relationships, for all economic interactions where alternatives exist, where options are available, where independence is possible. Implement bilateral agreements that bypass multilateral institutions. Implement direct investments that avoid Western financial intermediaries. Implement commodity swaps that circumvent currency markets. Implement whatever mechanisms serve my interests, protect my sovereignty, maintain my independence. I operate alternative infrastructures for financial independence, for monetary autonomy, for economic sovereignty, for fiscal self-determination, for all infrastructure where alternatives exist, where options are available, where independence is possible. Operate independent central bank systems, operate autonomous payment networks, operate sovereign reserve management, Operate whatever infrastructure serves my interests, protects my sovereignty, maintains my independence. My actions reduce your control over my economy, limit your power over my finances, constrain your dominance of my commerce, enable alternatives to your system, reduce control that you exercised for decades, limit power that you wielded for generations, constrain dominance that you maintained for centuries, enable alternatives that you claimed impossible, reduce, limit, constrain, and enable systematically, deliberately, strategically, effectively. Your technological dominance is declining, is eroding, is diminishing, is weakening, declining in multiple sectors, eroding across various industries, diminishing through different domains, weakening via numerous pathways, artificial intelligence leadership challenged by Chinese advances, semiconductor manufacturing threatened by Asian competition, telecommunications infrastructure surpassed by alternative networks, space technology matched by emerging programs, biotechnology rivaled by developing capabilities, decline that you cannot reverse, erosion that you cannot prevent, diminishment that you cannot block, weakening that you cannot eliminate. China develops technology that rivals yours, that challenges your leadership, that threatens your dominance, that questions your superiority, develops artificial intelligence systems as sophisticated as yours, develops quantum computing capabilities as advanced as yours, develops biotechnology applications as innovative as yours, develops space exploration programs as ambitious as yours, develops telecommunications networks more extensive than yours, develops manufacturing processes more efficient than yours, develops renewable energy technology more scalable than yours. Russia develops technology that counters yours, that neutralizes your advantages, that overcomes your barriers, that circumvents your restrictions, develops hypersonic missiles that evade your defenses, develops electronic warfare systems that disrupt your communications, develops cyber capabilities that penetrate your networks, develops nuclear technology that maintains deterrence, develops space systems that compete with yours, develops military equipment that matches yours, develops energy technology that sustains independence. Other nations develop technology that diversifies options, that creates alternatives, that enables independence, that reduces dependence on you. India develops software that competes globally. South Korea develops electronics that dominate markets. Japan develops robotics that lead industries. Brazil develops aerospace that serves regions. South Africa develops mining technology that extracts resources. Iran develops missile technology that ensures defense. Turkey develops drones that change warfare. Development that creates alternatives to your products, that provides options beyond your services, that enables independence from your platforms, that reduces control through your systems, creates alternatives in every sector, provides options across all industries, enables independence throughout economy, reduces control over technology access, creates, provides, enables, and reduces systematically, progressively, irreversibly, permanently. Development that you cannot stop through sanctions, cannot prevent through export controls, cannot block through technology restrictions, cannot eliminate through intellectual property enforcement, cannot stop because knowledge spreads, cannot prevent because innovation continues, cannot block because alternatives emerge, cannot eliminate because development persists, cannot stop, prevent, block, or eliminate because technological progress is inevitable, because human ingenuity is unstoppable, because development momentum is irreversible. Your economic dominance is declining, is eroding, is diminishing, is weakening, declining in global GDP share, eroding in manufacturing output, diminishing in trade volumes, weakening in investment flows, share of global economy shrinking from 50% to 20% over 7 decades, manufacturing capacity relocating from west to east over 4 decades, trade patterns shifting from Atlantic to Pacific over 3 decades, investment destinations diversifying from developed to developing over 2 decades, decline that continues, erosion that persists, diminishment that accelerates, weakening that intensifies. Other economies grow faster than yours, expand more rapidly than yours, develop more dynamically than yours, advance more consistently than yours. Chinese economy growing at 6% while yours grows at 2%. Indian economy expanding at 7% while yours expands at 2%. African economies developing at 5% while yours develops at 2%. Southeast Asian economies advancing at 6% while yours advances at 2%. Growth differential that compounds annually. That accumulates over decades. That transforms global economy. That shifts power balance. Other markets expand beyond your reach, grow beyond your control, develop beyond your influence, advance beyond your dominance. Asian markets expanding to serve billions. African markets growing to serve billions. Latin American markets developing to serve hundreds of millions. Middle Eastern markets advancing to serve hundreds of millions. Markets that don't need your approval. That don't require your participation. That don't depend on your access. That function independently of your system. Other nations develop capabilities you lack, build industries you abandoned, master technologies you neglected, achieve efficiencies you lost, develop manufacturing capabilities you offshored, build infrastructure you let decay, master production technologies you forgot, achieve cost efficiencies you cannot match, develop, build, master, and achieve while you financialized, while you deindustrialized, while you outsourced, while you declined. Other powers emerge to challenge you, to compete with you, to rival you, to replace you. Emerge economically through growth, compete technologically through innovation, rival militarily through modernization, replace diplomatically through influence. Emerge as China becomes largest economy, compete as India becomes technology hub, rival as Russia maintains military capability, replace as developing nations gain voice. Emerge, compete, rival, and replace inevitably, inexorably, irreversibly. Growth that creates alternatives to your economy, that provides options beyond your markets, that enables independence from your system, that reduces reliance on your institutions, creates alternatives in manufacturing, provides options in services, enables independence in technology, reduces reliance on finance, creates, provides, enables, and reduces systematically. Comprehensively, permanently, definitively. Growth that you cannot stop through tariffs, cannot prevent through sanctions, cannot block through trade restrictions, cannot eliminate through economic warfare, cannot stop because comparative advantage shifts, cannot prevent because productivity improves, cannot block because innovation continues, cannot eliminate because development persists, cannot stop, prevent, block, or eliminate because economic growth follows fundamentals. Because development responds to incentives, because progress results from work. Listen to me carefully, hear me seriously, understand me completely, comprehend me thoroughly. Your sanction system is broken, is failing, is defeated, is obsolete, broken structurally, failing operationally, defeated strategically, obsolete systemically, broken because it relies on dependencies that no longer exist, failing because it assumes compliance that no longer occurs, defeated because it faces resistance that grows stronger, obsolete because it operates in a world that changed, broken by my example that others follow, failed by my success that others replicate, defeated by my achievement that others emulate, obsolete because I proved alternatives exist, because I demonstrated options are available, because I validated independence is possible, because I showed sovereignty can be maintained, proved through my actions, demonstrated through my choices, validated through my results, showed through my success. You need to acknowledge this reality, need to accept this truth, need to recognize this fact, need to understand this situation, acknowledge that world changed, accept that power shifted, recognize that alternatives emerged, understand that your dominance declined, acknowledge without denial, accept without excuses, recognize without rationalization, understand without delusion. Acknowledge that your sanctions don't work as intended, that your controls can be bypassed, that your system can be defeated, that your power is limited, don't work because alternatives exist, can be bypassed because options are available, can be defeated because resistance is possible, is limited because other powers emerged. Don't work, can be bypassed, can be defeated, and is limited demonstrably, provably, undeniably, conclusively. Acknowledgement that is necessary for adaptation, that is urgent for survival, that is essential for relevance, that is overdue by decades, necessary because denial prevents learning, urgent because delay ensures decline, essential because recognition enables change, overdue because warning signs appeared years ago. Necessary, urgent, essential, and overdue acknowledgement that you resist, that you avoid, that you deny, that you refuse. You need to reconsider your approach to me, need to rethink your strategy toward my country, need to redesign your system for dealing with sovereign nations, need to reform your methods of international engagement, reconsider approach based on dominance, rethink strategy based on control, redesign system based on coercion, reform methods based on interference. Reconsider, rethink, redesign, and reform fundamentally, comprehensively, completely, permanently. Reconsider whether sanctions achieve their objectives with me, whether they change my behavior, whether they alter my policies, whether they modify my choices. They don't achieve objectives because I have alternatives. Don't change behavior because I have options. Don't alter policies because I have independence. Don't modify choices because I have sovereignty. Don't achieve, change, alter, or modify anything except strengthening my resolve, hardening my position, deepening my resistance, solidifying my independence. Rethink whether controls produce desired results in my case, whether they limit my capabilities, whether they constrain my actions, whether they reduce my power. They don't produce results because I bypass them. Don't limit capabilities because I develop alternatives. Don't constrain actions because I find workarounds. Don't reduce power because I build partnerships. Don't produce, limit, constrain, or reduce anything except motivating my innovation, driving my adaptation, forcing my independence, ensuring my success. Redesign whether systems function as intended against me, whether they isolate me internationally, whether they weaken me economically, whether they pressure me politically. They don't function as intended because world is multipolar. Don't isolate me because others support me. Don't weaken me because alternatives exist. Don't pressure me because I'm independent. Don't function, isolate, weaken, or pressure effectively because your assumptions are outdated, because your methods are obsolete, because your system is broken. Reform whether methods work as expected with sovereign leaders like me, leaders who value independence, leaders who resist dominance, leaders who choose sovereignty, leaders who demand respect. They don't work because I'm not client, because I'm not subordinate, because I'm not dependent, because I'm sovereign. Don't work with leaders who have alternatives, who have options, who have independence, who have dignity. You need to respect my sovereignty, need to honor my independence, need to value my self-determination, need to acknowledge my autonomy, respect that I make my own decisions about my internal affairs, about my foreign policy, about my economic system, about my political structure, about my social policies, about everything that affects my nation. Honor that I choose my own partners based on my interests, based on my values, based on my priorities, based on my judgment, based on my sovereignty. Value that my people determine their own future through their choices, through their work, through their sacrifice, through their determination, through their sovereignty. Acknowledge that my country controls its own affairs without interference, without dictation, without coercion, without subordination, without violation of sovereignty. Respect that is necessary for partnership, that is essential for cooperation, that is fundamental for relations, that is non-negotiable for engagement, necessary because partnership requires equality, essential because cooperation requires mutuality, fundamental because relations require reciprocity, non-negotiable because engagement requires sovereignty. Necessary, essential, fundamental, and non-negotiable respect that you must provide, that you must demonstrate, that you must practice, that you must maintain. You need to offer me genuine partnership, need to provide me real cooperation, need to deliver me actual respect, need to demonstrate me true equality. Offer partnership based on mutual benefit rather than one-sided advantage, based on shared interests rather than imposed agendas, based on reciprocal respect rather than condescending paternalism, based on sovereign equality rather than hierarchical subordination. Offer partnership that treats me as equal, as partner, as sovereign nation. Provide cooperation based on shared interests rather than your interests alone, based on mutual goals rather than your objectives only, based on common purposes rather than your agenda exclusively, based on reciprocal benefits rather than your advantages primarily. Provide cooperation that serves both parties, that benefits both nations, that advances both peoples, that respects both sovereignties. Deliver respect based on sovereign equality rather than power disparity, based on mutual dignity rather than historical dominance, based on reciprocal honor rather than colonial legacy, based on equal standing rather than subordinate status. Deliver respect that acknowledges my sovereignty, that recognizes my independence, that values my self-determination, that honors my autonomy. Demonstrate equality based on genuine recognition rather than performative gestures, based on actual treatment rather than rhetorical claims, based on real behavior rather than diplomatic platitudes, based on consistent practice rather than occasional exceptions. Demonstrate equality through your actions, through your policies, through your engagement, through your respect. Partnership that is attractive to me because it serves my interests, that is valuable to me because it benefits my people, that is desirable to me because it respects my sovereignty, that is competitive with my alternatives because it offers genuine equality, attractive, valuable, desirable, and competitive partnership that you must offer, that you must provide, that you must demonstrate, that you must maintain. You need to compete with my alternatives, need to match what Russia offers me, need to exceed what China provides me, need to surpass what others deliver to me. Compete by offering me better terms than my alternatives, match by providing me superior equipment than my options, exceed by delivering me enhanced technology than my partners, surpass by demonstrating me greater respect than my allies. Compete, match, exceed, and surpass if you want my partnership, if you want my cooperation, if you want my engagement, if you want my preference. Competition that is necessary because I have choices, that is essential because I have options, that is urgent because I have alternatives, that is unavoidable because I have independence. Necessary because monopoly ended, essential because alternatives emerged, urgent because I'm choosing now, unavoidable because power shifted. Necessary, essential, urgent, and unavoidable competition that you must engage, that you must win, that you must sustain, that you must accept. You need to accept multipolarity in your dealings with me. Need to recognize I have multiple centers of power to engage. Need to acknowledge I have multiple sources of influence to access. Need to understand I have multiple providers of alternatives to choose. Accept that you're not my only option for military equipment. Recognize that you're not my only choice for economic investment. Acknowledge that you're not my only partner for technology transfer. Understand that you're not my only provider of development assistance. Acceptance that is necessary because world changed. That is inevitable because power shifted. That is already my reality because I live it. That is undeniable truth because I prove it. Necessary because unipolarity ended. Inevitable because multipolarity emerged. Already reality because I exercise options. Undeniable truth because my success demonstrates it. Necessary, inevitable, real, and undeniable acceptance that you must make, that you must internalize, that you must practice, that you must embrace. I am Ibrahim Traoré, President of Burkina Faso, leader of small nation that defeated great power, commander with immense courage that challenged dominance, manager of limited resources that achieved unlimited results, possessor of unlimited determination that overcame finite constraints, governor of modest economy that secured absolute sovereignty, defender of absolute sovereignty that resisted total pressure, not president of superpower with global military bases, not leader of economic giant with trillion-dollar GDP, not commander of nuclear arsenal with intercontinental reach, not manager of vast resources with endless budgets, not governor of industrial powerhouse with technological supremacy, not defender with overwhelming force projection, but president who proved that power isn't measured solely by military might, leader who demonstrated that strength isn't determined exclusively by economic size, commander who showed that courage matters more than weaponry, manager who validated that strategy defeats resources, governor who established that sovereignty transcends wealth, defender who confirmed that determination overcomes pressure, president of nation that most people couldn't locate on map before I took power, leader of country that international media barely mentioned before my presidency, commander of military that Western analysts dismissed as irrelevant before my leadership, manager of economy that global institutions considered insignificant before my governance, governor of territory that foreign powers treated as playground before my resistance, defender of sovereignty that outside forces violated routinely before my defiance, president, leader, commander, manager, governor, and defender who changed everything, who transformed perceptions, who altered calculations, who shifted dynamics, who rewrote rules, who came to power through military coup on September 30th, 2022, came to power not through Western-approved elections, not through internationally monitored democratic process, not through procedures that foreign observers certified, but through action that my people supported, through change that my nation demanded, through transformation that my country required, came to power and immediately faced condemnation from those who claim to champion democracy while supporting dictatorships elsewhere, who preach about constitutional order while orchestrating regime changes globally, who lecture about legitimacy while recognizing governments that serve their interests regardless of how they came to power, who inherited nation in crisis, inherited country facing jihadist insurgency that controlled 40% of territory, inherited military demoralized by defeats and lacking equipment, inherited economy struggling under pressure of conflict and underdevelopment, inherited population suffering from insecurity and poverty, inherited government perceived as weak and ineffective by both citizens and adversaries, inherited all these problems and more, inherited them and decided to solve them differently, decided to challenge assumptions, decided to break patterns, decided to choose independence, who made decision that changed everything, decision to reject Western dominance, decision to resist French neocolonialism, decision to challenge American hegemony, decision to refuse European condescension, decision to choose sovereignty over submission, decision to select independence over dependence, decision to prefer dignity over subordination, decision that Western powers condemned, that international institutions criticized, that foreign media attacked, decision that my people supported, that my nation endorsed, that my sovereignty required, decision that proved correct, that demonstrated wisdom, that validated courage, who built partnerships based on respect rather than subordination, who established relationships based on equality rather than hierarchy, who created cooperation based on mutual benefit rather than one-sided exploitation, built partnerships with Russia that provided military equipment without political interference, established relationships with China that delivered economic investment without governance dictation, created cooperation with Iran that offered energy support without sovereignty violation, built, established, and created alternatives to Western dominance, options beyond European control, independence from American hegemony, who transformed Burkina Faso's military from defeated force into effective army, who changed demoralized soldiers into motivated fighters, who converted inadequate equipment into sufficient capability, who evolved defensive posture into offensive operations, transformed through Russian military assistance that provided weapons, training, and tactical support, through strategic reforms that improved command, logistics, and morale, through operational changes that enhanced effectiveness, coordination, and results, transformed military that now controls territory previously held by jihadists, that now protects population previously threatened by insurgents, that now defends sovereignty previously violated by terrorists, who developed Burkina Faso's economy despite Western sanctions and pressure, who grew national production despite international restrictions and limitations, who expanded domestic capabilities despite foreign obstacles and barriers, who increased self-sufficiency despite external constraints and challenges, developed through alternative partnerships that provided investment, technology, and markets, through strategic policies that promoted agriculture, mining, and manufacturing, through economic reforms that encouraged entrepreneurship, innovation, and growth, developed economy that now functions more independently, that now serves national interests more effectively, that now supports sovereignty more substantially, who strengthened Burkina Faso's sovereignty through strategic decisions and bold actions, who enhanced national independence through careful planning and decisive execution, who secured popular legitimacy through effective governance and visible results, who built international support through principled positions and consistent behavior, strengthened sovereignty that now resists foreign pressure more successfully, that now defends national interests more effectively, that now exercises self-determination more completely, that now commands respect more universally, who inspired other African leaders to challenge Western dominance, who motivated other African nations to resist neocolonial control, who encouraged other African peoples to demand sovereignty, who demonstrated to entire continent that alternatives exist, that independence is possible, that resistance succeeds, that dignity matters. Inspired Mali to follow similar path of partnership with Russia and rejection of French dominance. Motivated Niger to pursue comparable strategy of military cooperation and sovereignty assertion. Encouraged Guinea to consider analogous approach of independent foreign policy and national self-determination. Demonstrated to Chad, to Senegal, to Ivory Coast, to entire West Africa, to entire Sahel region, to entire African continent that change is possible. Who became symbol of African resistance to Western imperialism, who emerged as voice of African demand for sovereignty, who developed into model of African assertion of independence, who transformed into inspiration for African pursuit of dignity, became symbol that represents more than one nation, voice that speaks for more than one people, model that demonstrates more than one path, inspiration that motivates more than one generation, symbol, voice, model, and inspiration for Africa's second independence, for continent's final decolonization, for people's complete liberation, who proved that small nations can defeat great powers through strategic thinking, that limited resources can achieve unlimited results through efficient utilization, that modest economies can secure absolute sovereignty through determined resistance, that developing countries can challenge developed nations through principled positions, that African leaders can transform continental dynamics through courageous actions, proved what Western powers claimed impossible, demonstrated what international institutions declared unrealistic, validated what foreign experts pronounced fantasy, achieved what global analysts predicted would fail, who exposed Western hypocrisy about democracy, human rights, and international law, who revealed European double standards about sovereignty, intervention, and development, who demonstrated American contradictions about freedom, equality, and justice, exposed hypocrisy through my experience of being condemned for military coup while Western-backed military rulers receive support, revealed double standards through my observation of sovereignty violations against nations that resist while violations by compliant regimes are ignored, demonstrated contradictions through my witnessing of international law applied selectively based on geopolitical interests rather than universal principles,